The shocking truth behind the Mike Sullivan firing has been revealed as we get some shocking comments and insight into the move by GM Kyle Dubas and his media availability. And this has serious implications on the team moving forward, as it looks like both parties were not aligned with the future and the vision for this team. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Penguins Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 68% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with your Pittsburgh Penguins as we head into a very busy offseason here, Mark, with this team, it's free. Go down below, hit that subscribe button, get to stay up to date with everything going on with this team. But this was, I guess, the first domino to fall for this team this year. I mean, there was rumblings. We've talked about it the last couple of weeks that maybe Mike Sullivan was going to be let go or fired. And, you know, this morning I covered in a video this morning, and I am curious for your thoughts on it, first of all, Mark, about the firing. But, you know, I did cover and say that they framed it like it wasn't a firing and they mutually agreed to part ways. But some of the comments from Kyle Dubas today allude to the fact that it was a firing and he did actually fire Mike Sullivan. So we'll get into that in a second. But what are your initial thoughts on the firing? And again, we're going to get into some pretty crazy comments here from Kyle Dubas.
I mean, we've seen a lot of people say, hey, maybe Mike Sullivan's on his way out. And this really took the NHL by shock once it finally happened. This was someone that I felt like, just looking from the outside, that was going to be a part of this team during the entire Crosby era. We've seen back-to-back Stanley Cups. He was the perfect fit for this team. But I think Kyle Dubas is looking at that in the sense of, hey, it's easier to fire a coach and find a new one than to turn everyone off this roster to bring in new guys and hope that fixes it. So from one standpoint, I can understand the panic. You're looking at making a change. There's a lot of coaches hitting the open market. Rick Tocchet, who is actually part of the coaching staff with the Penguins team, is looking like he could be on his way out of Vancouver, which will be a completely different video. But player or coaches like that hitting the market does make it interesting. But overall, I think firing Sullivan was kind of a stupid idea and kind of the thing they did by Kyle Dubas.
Yeah, it's going to be, time will tell, I think, to really know what's going to happen with this team and what kind of a decision this was. But, you know, reading the fan base, a lot of people thought that it was time. I would say majority of fans, and I'm not speaking for all fans, thought that it was time that they move off of Mike Sullivan. But there is a portion of the fan base, and honestly, I still think Mike Sullivan's a great coach. I just think that this team isn't built to win. That's just the fact of the matter. But let's get into some comments from Kyle Dubas now this morning, because he did hold a media availability, of course, right after the firing, which is what I'm going to call it at this point. He did say that he called Sidney Crosby on Sunday morning to let him know that it was happening, to give him a heads up. And he said that he had a 5-minute conversation with him and that he had to do what was best for the organization. Now that itself, and if you watch the full clip, he actually said that he called Sidney Crosby before he met with Mike Sullivan. So to me, I think this is a firing. I think that they had a conversation last week and they were not aligned on their vision for the team. And Kyle Dubas said, I have to go in a different direction for the betterment of this team right now. And we'll get into some other crazy reports, because there was reports that Mike Sullivan was demanding a bunch of stuff. I mean, he wasn't a free agent. He wasn't re-signing. I don't think there's much truth to that. We'll get to that in a second. But Kyle Dubas went on to say, we're looking for someone who can continue to partner with us on all that we're undertaking and understands that the job ahead is going to take time, going to be a time of transition. There's a lot of great things about the Pittsburgh Penguins, and we want to preserve those things while continuing to move the team ahead. So I think what he's alluding to there is not moving off of Kris Letang, Sidney Crosby, Evgeni Malkin, but still getting younger and trying to compete. And to me, it sounds like Mike Sullivan probably had very little interest in doing exactly what Kyle Dubas has said the last couple of weeks and days that, you know, he wants to do with this team. So that was very interesting. And then Kyle Dubas also reiterated a couple of times that it's a lot to ask of a coach of Mike Sullivan's capability to find a way to go from a contender to transition back to a contender without obviously being fired or going to a different team. And I think that is true. And I am curious about this, Mark. Like, do you think that it was a misalignment of ideologies about the team? Because that's kind of what it's looking like to me now. And I think that could be a little dangerous, but at the same time, whatever coach you end up bringing in, I think you might have to go young at this point because you're on the up right now, right? And then maybe you fire that coach and get another coach when you're a contender again. But Sidney Crosby's not getting any younger. So what do you think about this? Do you think it was a misalignment?
I mean, the big thing, and I've said it a lot in these videos, I think as long as you have Sidney Crosby on your team, you need to try to compete in a way. Yes, getting younger, doing a quick retool is probably the smartest decision the Pittsburgh Penguins can make at this point. But if Mike Sullivan was completely not on board with going out, getting younger, trying to get a little faster, bringing in new faces to maybe get to the contention window again in 2 years from now. I could see the point of Dubas saying, hey, well, maybe we'll move off. You can go find a new team that's in the window of contending. There's a lot of openings happening that he could head to. But overall, it's such a weird thing, dear. It's like looking at this team: Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Karlsson. These guys are players you have on contending teams. So I don't know how Dubas is really going to take these guys, convince them that, hey, we're going to get younger. We might not make the playoffs for 2 years, but we might get top picks when these guys could be retired in the next 3+ years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you've been talking about it a lot the last couple of videos in the last couple of weeks, right? And I agree with you. This is the way that the team should be going. If Mike Sullivan wasn't on board, then maybe it was time to go in a different direction. Now, this is from Adam, and I thought this was interesting because there's a couple different accounts saying the same type of thing, but then there's a couple other insiders reporting the opposite. So, we'll dive into it here. But they received word yesterday that Sullivan and the Penguins would be parting ways. That is true. They did make the decision on Sunday and then, obviously officially announced it on Monday. And the team met with Sullivan on Sunday, and Sullivan had a list of non-negotiable demands, and Dubis and the Fenway Sports Group said thanks, but no thanks, essentially. So that's one report. Obviously, this is from @Hockey Insider, which is a rumor account. Let's call it what it is. There are times where this account is right, but it is a rumor account. I am also right sometimes on Twitter, right, with some of my takes. So take it with a grain of salt. It said, breaking news: according to sources close to the Pittsburgh Penguins, captain Sidney Crosby is not happy at all with Sullivan's departure. And we know that Sidney Crosby doesn't necessarily like change. And I mean, Mike Sullivan's been coach for 10 years at this point, right? So you have to take this into account that he's not happy, and he's pondering requesting a trade to a contending team in the summer. Huge news this morning. Now, what do you think about this? Because there's a lot of this flying around that Sidney Crosby now wants out of Pittsburgh. I don't know if there's too much truth to that, but I do believe that he's probably not happy today.
I mean, the biggest thing is, listen, the players love Sullivan in the locker room. It's going to suck for a lot of guys. They're going to not be happy about this. But Sidney Crosby demanding trade is just not going to happen. Let's be honest. He bleeds yellow. He's going to be a part of the Pittsburgh Penguins organization for the rest of his career. And it wouldn't surprise me if he stuck around in some way, shape, or form, whatever it is, after retirement. This is someone that you look at a lot of the greats that are in the league, even Ovi. And listen, we don't want to talk about the Washington Capitals, but Ovi feels like a player that will never leave the Capitals. This is the same as Crosby. There's a lot of guys. So overall, do not worry. I cannot see a world where Crosby demands a trade unless they trade absolutely everyone, bring in a bunch of 19-year-olds and just leave him in the lineup.
Yeah, I don't think, if Sidney Crosby was going to leave Pittsburgh, it would have happened by now. I think at this point in time, this is not the thing that's going to make or break or be the deal breaker, right? I think he wants to be a Pittsburgh Penguin for life. And I think, like you mentioned, I think there's an avenue after retirement where he stays on with the team in some capacity as well. And Elliot Friedman also asked, not himself, but he is reporting that Kyle Dubas was asked if Crosby, if he's concerned Crosby will want out or want to leave due to this move, and Dubas simply said no. And he obviously, had a conversation with Sidney Crosby, so I'm sure he knows, but of course he's going to say that. But I don't believe there's anything to that initial rumor. And, there's a lot of fan reaction out there today that a lot of people are like, it was probably time to move off of Mike Sullivan. There's been no success, but at the same time, the last 10 years have been amazing. First back-to-back Stanley Cup champions in the salary cap era, so obviously great accomplishment there. So again, there's a lot going on and reminiscing about him, but the search starts now for a new head coach, and that's something we have to dive into quickly here before we wrap up. As Kyle Dubas said that they'll cast a wide net. Stop me if you've heard that before. Every single GM says that about their coaching search, but long-time head coaches from Europe, coaches from junior college, etc. We will turn every page to find the best person for the job. So what do you think about this? In what direction do you think they're going? There's a lot of, I know you know a lot about Rick Tocchet as well. There's a lot of talk about that, right? So that's up in the air too. Former Pittsburgh Penguins assistant coach. So, who do you think could be the man for the job? Do you think they're going to go with a younger coach? I think there's, with Kyle Dubas, you really never know.
And the biggest thing is, listen, we know Dubas likes to bring in maybe ex-coaches, something that he has been with. But I think the big thing is you need to find a coach that can grow with the team, someone that can grow a relationship with the players if you want them there long term. You can go and find someone to get a 2-year window. John Tortorella is a name that is usually around the 2-year window, but I do not think that is the fit for Pittsburgh. But overall, I think the most sense would come from Rick Tocchet. And I don't want to say Tocchet's linked to him, but he did coach there. We've seen him there during some of these Stanley Cup runs. During the Stanley Cup, Rick Tocchet knows the system. He knows the players. Yeah. He coached a lot of these guys for many years. So he would make sense, but it's going to get really interesting. And I hope Dubas really goes out to find the perfect coach instead of just panic hiring the top guy that might be too old for the position.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. And funny enough, the number one coach on the market right now is probably Mike Sullivan, according to the Boston Bruins, the Chicago Blackhawks, New York Rangers, Philadelphia Flyers. Imagine if he were to go to the Philadelphia Flyers. I mean, that would be a little disastrous, but we'll see what happens, and we'll see who ends up as the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I do wonder, again, it could be Rick Tocchet, it could be somebody with no NHL experience, to kind of usher in a new era of Pittsburgh Penguins hockey with Sidney Crosby still at the forefront of that. But it's going to be very interesting. Let us know in the comments. We want to hear from you what you think of everything that's come out after the firing of Mike Sullivan. Again, I'm going to call it a firing because everything that was said today leads me to believe that it was a firing. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens next and how Kyle Dubas decides to build out this team this summer from the head coaching position. And of course, they have a ton of salary cap space. So it's going to be very fun to watch. So let us know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything Pittsburgh Penguins.